Ask it.
Ask it.
Ask it.
Ask it.
Ask it.
Welcome to the Ask It podcast, a blend of spirituality, philosophy and psychology, which rather than providing answers, considers good questions. Okay, so can I start with my question that I ask everybody, which is, how would you introduce you?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I would introduce myself, I guess, as a person that's been addicted to the art of remote viewing for pretty much nearly all my life now, getting on for 25 years, a natural intuitive and a very creative person. I'm a photographer as well.
Yeah, great. Okay, so so you say that you're kind of a natural intuitive person, me too, and you've been fascinated by remote viewing for all of your life.
Yes.
So how did you come across it? How were you led to that?
Yeah, remote viewing itself, I actually found in 1992. I was then getting into heavy UFO research, and at a UFO conference, there was a taped conversation with a guy in the US who claimed to be a military spy using psychic techniques, which he called remote viewing, to spy on the Russians. And once I heard that at the UFO conference, it kind of clicked with me, and I knew that I just had to do whatever I could to try to learn it. Of course, it was harder back then because in '92 we didn't have any internet or anything.
Yeah. So how are you self-taught, or did you go on a course, or did somebody else teach you?
I was primarily taught by a man called Lee Culver, who I met on the internet at the time through some kind of message boards, because that's all we had back then was message boards through email. And he said he was doing a remote viewing course in London, and I was unemployed at the time, and he knew I didn't have any money, and he offered me a free position on the course to do it if I could find my way up there. So I spent 2 weekends up in London training in it, and I've essentially been refining the process and learning even more in these 25 years since doing that. Really, it's a continuous process. I don't think we ever reach the stage of knowing what we're doing with psychic ability.
Yeah. So I came across remote viewing through listening to pods, and obviously hearing about how the military in the US were using it. So that in the USA rather, that's how I came across it.
Yes.
But I suppose my initial question, being an intuitive such as yourself, I wonder what's the distinction between remote viewing and what we might call psychic abilities or clairvoyant abilities?
I mean, there are two main differences, really. There is a certain what I will class as a backbone set of techniques behind classical remote viewing, which most people adhere to, and that's been mutated into several different forms. But the real main difference, really, is because we're all just intuitives doing our intuitive thing, and pretty much anything's allowed under the umbrella of remote viewing if you agree to do it within a set of something like around 5 or 6 very distinct scientific rules. And for example, the rules are it can never be spontaneous. It's always a project that's thought up and managed, so it's not a spontaneous occurrence. The information the remote viewer gives is always recorded in a format, so video, audio, or in written form. The remote viewer should always be blind to the target. They should not know anything about the target, and anyone who knows the target is not allowed in the room or the vicinity of the remote viewer when they're doing their remote viewing. And one of the most important ones is we should only really work on targets for people where there's an element of feedback that's available after it's all done for the remote viewer and the analyst, so that you can take the remote viewing data, you can take the known data, and then you can give it a very good level of accuracy.
Yeah. So it's a much more structured and, as you say, scientific approach.
Yeah. Like, because I trained in clairvoyance and all kinds of techniques before I trained in remote viewing. And, a lot of that stuff was one-to-one with the person in the room with you who needed the information. But with remote viewing, we're trying to remove all other routes of possible communication, body language and whatever. It could be pheromones or all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
So we try to remove that by being absolutely blind and not having any contact with the person that wants the information. And all we're given as remote viewers is the project is usually assigned a made up or generated random number, and that number acts as a focal point, but it's really just a piece of admin. It gives you something to talk about. So, if you set me a target, I usually do the day's date. So if I set a target, for example, for my remote viewers, today I would use 3009, and that'd be the number. I'd say, tell me about target 3009.
Right. Okay. Because how I first understood it was that, I suppose, and how the military were using it was by coordinates, and then wanting to know what's there, or what does this look like. Yeah, and testing it in that
that's
way.
how it very first started in the 1970s, 1972 onwards. Yeah, they started. And Ingo Swann came up with the name for remote viewing, and he was the primary person at first, and he also came up with the way of using coordinates. So they just pick coordinates, give the coordinates to a remote viewer. He didn't know where that was in the world, and then he described what it was. But after several years of doing that, the skeptics, or the people, or the scientific oversight committees, I should say, looked at that approach, and they said, well, over a period of time, a person, once you've given them feedback, might accrue a certain amount of knowledge in their head, so they start to know where these coordinates are in the world.
Yeah.
That's why they dropped the coordinates eventually and made them just random numbers. And they found that random numbers work just as well. And in fact, someone can literally, and I've done this many times, someone can just give me a target, and I ignore any numbers or anything I'm given. And I can just use the word target or not use anything at all and still get accurate data on what the target is.
Fantastic. Really, really interesting. So, okay, so what can a target be? So how might I approach you with a target? Well, I guess I wouldn't. I'd approach whoever's going to give that to you. Yeah.
Most often than not, there's usually a middleman in between the project manager and so there's the client project manager, and then there's the viewers. So the client talks to a project manager about what he needs to know. They create a target, write it down on a sheet of paper, put it in a Word document or something, and then they randomly assign the remote viewers just a random number, and they say, here's your number, you've got 2 weeks to do this, go out and get the information. And that's pretty much it as a process. You can do it without the middleman, but there is some kind of training involved where you have to teach someone on how to set a target and not give any information to you as a remote viewer.
Yeah. And so then you're the remote viewer, so you'll get the data, as it were.
Yes.
But then then a completely independent person analyzes that data.
Not always, but
Not always.
That can happen on occasion. Yes.
Yeah.
And in a truly scientific structure of doing this, there would be 4 possible targets, and the analyst wouldn't know what the target was, but he'd then take the remote viewing data and he'd try to match it to the one that he felt was the real one. So if there were 4 targets, 3 would be fake, but 1 would be real.
Yeah.
And he would try to, but that's under what we call triple blind conditions. That happens in science, but for the general use for myself and people that are using this for clients on a day-to-day basis, we work generally just double blind. Yeah. So
yes. Yeah. So if I thought, right, okay, I want to see what this is like for me, what kind of targets could I have? What kind of questions, or what could I expect to have answered, or some guidance on for me?
I mean, for remote viewers, the interesting thing is we can go anywhere in time and space, so anything could be a potential target. A lot of the stuff we do is past stuff, where people want to know, mysteries about the past, how the pyramids were built, all that kind of stuff. I've worked 250 missing persons cases for the United States Police Forces. So, but on those, I know a little bit of information. I know I'm working a missing person case, but that still leaves, out of all the people that have ever died and they're gone missing, that still leaves billions and billions of choices. So
Sure.
Knowing it's a person is not really telling you anything specific about the target. So it's still classable as a blind target. At the moment, I have a business with 4 other remote viewers and support staff We've been running for 4 years, and we are predicting news events and also markets and cryptocurrencies for people as well, so financial information.
Yeah, I guess you get a lot of that. Yeah.
Yeah, and there are people out there, I don't do it myself, but there are people that do. They will have a client, and they will tell the client what their future life path would be, or the best person which would be a mate for them, a best place to live or move, all that kind of stuff. So we can use it in. I mean, we haven't really fully explored how many ways we can use this, Rita. I mean, I've even used it for medical practices. So I've worked with a doctor on a couple of tests where he's had some patients, and all I had is a random number. I've gone away with the specific aim of looking inside a body at all the different levels to have a look and see what I could describe. And I've accurately described what he classes as illnesses within those people.
Fantastic. So, okay then. So, loads of questions firing up in my brain.
It always does that, yeah.
Yes, fantastic. So I must stop saying that word. Right. So if I, yeah. Okay, so I'm going to ask you about the future and being fixed, because are we saying that the future is fixed? Because I'm not sure I kind of buy that.
No. And something I need to say on this as well, when a remote viewer does past and present targets, if they're a good remote viewer, and there are various levels, like everything in life, there are various levels. But the good thing about remote viewing is because it's all scientific, we do kind of database and track our accuracy. So I know, for example, I'm well over 80% accurate 80% of the time I do all my psychic work. And that's based on 25 years of data that I've tracked it and kept score on. I forgot where my friend was going on this now.
Fixed future.
Fixed targets, yeah. So past and present targets, I'm very accurate on. On future-based targets, I'm less accurate on that. On my database accuracy on those, I'm on the majority of looking at news events a month or so ahead, I'm only 65% accurate. So if I give you 10 events that I think is going to happen, only 6 or 7 of them will happen.
That's still that's way higher than chance anyway, isn't it?
It's higher than chance, yes. But there's less accuracy, and we don't know exactly why this happens, other than it's kind of indicating by quantum physics and stuff that all the probabilities of all the things that can happen are still wide open. And the closer you get to the event, it coalesces down into one, if you're like a second before the event, it coalesces into one possibility. So we think that might be happening. Also, a lot of the information I do, for example, we put out for paying subscribers, and I do have information that gets spread to various intelligence sources and other people as well. So if we're putting out information saying, okay, we think in New York next month there's going to be a terror attack and it's going to look like this, it's quite possible as well as the probability thing, it's quite possible that other people are taking that information and they're also acting upon that information, so the event might not occur as you've seen it.
Yeah.
So there's that possibility, and there's probably other stuff that's happening in there. Well, I do believe that a lot of people have. I think there's a destiny element involved as well.
Yes.
For example, I'd love to win 100 million on the lottery, on the Euro Millions. But I after doing it for such an amount of time and seeing that no remote viewer has won, or no absolutely amazing psychic that I know, and I've had contact with quite a few now, has never been able to win the top prize in like these big lottery draws and stuff. It leads me to believe that there is some kind of universal plan or destiny go. And I know that from myself, because I know that if I actually did win 100 million on the lottery, then I would give up remote viewing and give up everything, move to a desert island, live in luxury, and never do this again. And I actually do think that doing this is probably part of my destiny, because it's always been something that I've always wanted to do from 10 years on.
Yes, that makes so much sense to me, because I don't do it for the general public now, but I used to do readings for people, and largely with tarot. And my feeling was exactly as you've said, that there's certain key events that we've signed up for, that we're supposed to experience, like you say, your life's purpose, or however you want to look at it. And I would say to people, look, if you change nothing, this is the probable outcome of where you are now, if you were to change nothing. But actually, there are a number of factors that could influence that. so that's why I think that you can't, there may be certain events that you can predict, but in a
Yeah.
more general sense, I think you can only really predict trends,
Yeah,
really.
yeah. Uh, uh, and we're quite good with what we're doing with the cryptos. It's taken us a while to get there because it's an experimental process, really, trying to use intuition and remote viewing in a natural way against something that for example, a crypto like Bitcoin, which is the world's number one crypto. You have millions of people, probably tens of millions of people around the world now, essentially all have their own idea, that their own intent, their own aims and goes for it, all fighting. And you can roughly say that there's going to be 50% of those tens of millions of people that want it to go up, but there are also tens of millions of people that are shorting it and want to go down. So
Yeah,
there's all this intent involved as well, so that you're fighting against, as well as the probabilities and everything else. So I think it's a scale of things that are happening there, and yeah, but with cryptos we are getting quite good now at being able to chart the trends of it. But I would say our accuracy is good for months at a time. When I've tried to look, and I've done quite a lot of these projects over the last 6 months, I tried to look 2, 3, 4 years ahead. I think that's when that we go wildly inaccurate. It's just not working that far out for us at the moment.
yeah, yeah. And so you mentioned intent.
Yes,
So intent is, it, I guess, important. You have to be in the right mindset.
we think from our research into remote viewing and all psychic stuff, actually, that intent of everyone involved in the experiment is the driving force. And it may we don't know, because we don't know how remote viewing works, or even how all psychic stuff works, really. But primarily remote viewing, it could even be, or a major proportion of it at this stage could even be just, and I say just telepathy, but it could be telepathy between, if you were the tasker or the client. And even though you're not telling me the target, it could be a telepathic connection between you and me. And I could, I could just be giving you the information that you want to know rather than the information that's actually real.
Yeah,
It's really complex, you see, because with remote viewing, we can, and we've proved this with the experiments that I've done, thousands of them, and many other people have done millions of them, that as a remote viewer, you can go anywhere. So you can go anywhere, like, you can get information from the far reaches of the galaxy, or you can get, information from the bottom of the sea, from inside an electron, for example. But you can also pick up and feel they're just as real as all that other information, thoughts, feelings, and intent inside a person's head as well.
yeah,
So, yeah, there's no way to differentiate at this moment in time, or no one's come up with it yet, which what you're accessing when you get this information.
yeah. So what's your understanding so far of the process and how this works? What are you tapping into?
Well, that's a good question. I can't prove it, but my belief system from doing this for 20 odd years now, nearly 30 years, is that everything in the universe, or the known universe, and it might extend past that, that everything that we can possibly think of, see, and beyond, is interconnected, and it is exchanging information on some kind of invisible level. And quantum physics kind of supports all that, because they have particles. You can have two entangled particles, one here, one at the other end of the universe, and if you spin this one here on Earth, the
Yeah,
other one at the far end of the universe automatically spins. So they must be in some kind of form of communication.
yeah,
So I liken it a bit like, and I know this is quite sad, really, the force in the Star Wars films. I think that there's a
yes,
force in the universe that connects and runs through everything. And for example, when I'm remote viewing, if someone gives me the remote viewing target of the moon to look at, the moon landings, when I focus my intent and do my RV, I'm not actually going to the moon and getting information. I'm just going inside my head, and all information that ever exists about the moon, or that will ever exist in the future, is accessible within me already. So I'm just going within myself to get that information.
yes. So it's oh, what's the guy's name? Tom, physicist. Tom, it'll come to me. I've got his book, My Big Toe. Um, he talks about data. Just everything is data.
Yes.
Is
Yeah.
that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, I'm so
Yeah.
yeah, so it's everywhere around us. We are, we are essentially, when you look at us, we are made of stars. We are the universe, and I think all data, all information about the universe resides within us. We just have to learn how to tap into that.
Yeah. And some people historically have called that the Akashic record,
Yes,
or you've
yes,
got Jung's collective unconscious, which really it's
absolutely.
all pointing in the same direction, isn't it?
It is,
Yeah.
Eastern tradition stuff call it like chi energy and stuff as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and as we said in the sci-fi films, Star Wars, they call it the Force, and I
Mm.
think that's the closest analogy I can get to it. Is there's this invisible force that flows within everything in the universe, and it just allows us, if you can learn to subtly, read the subtle, because with remote viewing, you see, the data I get is incredibly subtle. So I'm just sat there I use a tablet nowadays, and I do it on tablet, but traditionally you would literally just sit at a table like I'm sat here now with a stack of white paper and a pen, and you would just, someone would give you the random number, and you would literally just go into it and just do 10, 20, 30 pages of words and sketches.
Yeah.
And you're just tapping into yourself to get that.
Yeah. Okay, so we're talking about remote viewing, which
Yes.
suggests that it's largely visual images that come. But I know it when I'm doing a kind of more clairvoyant reading, being a sensitive person, it will be perhaps sensory. I'll get a physical feeling, maybe even a smell,
Yeah.
an emotional feeling. Do you get all of that kind of information?
We
Yeah.
do, and it's well known within remote viewing circles that when they came up with the name remote viewing, in 1972, it's a bit of a wrong description for remote perception would be better, I guess. But yeah, there's for the majority of us as remote viewers, there is not a lot of visual information, and we have to be very careful in remote viewing with visual information, because if the image you're getting in your mind's eye is very clear and distinct, we know from years of doing this that's most generally imagination, and we have a process where we move that to one side.
Right.
Yeah, so we're really looking for the fuzzy, kind of indistinct, hardly there kind of imagery. But the majority of us within remote viewing, and I would say 95% of my personal remote viewing, is internal feelings. So I feel that the target is code. I feel that the target, if I touched it, would be metallic. But we can, as remote viewers, and what we do in a stage called stage 2 or sensory stage, we do teach ourselves to taste the target, to smell the target, to touch it. So we can do all that, and we get all that sensory information in our remote viewing sessions.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Um, okay, so let me take you back to something, because you've already given so much information, I don't want to miss it. So you said about doing missing persons work for the police in the States. So how do they give you feedback? Do you know how successful you've been?
Yeah, I don't do it anymore. I worked with a group at the time, and they're still out there. They're called the Find Me Group. Um, uh, and it's a great way to work, especially if you're a psychic, because it's run by a gentleman called Kelly Snyder, and he essentially was at one point a cop and a DEA agent, Drug Enforcement Agency agent. So he has contacts with the police, and they trust him. And he essentially works as your project manager. So he would gather all the details about a case, a missing person, and the police generally come to psychics and intuitives as a last resort.
Yeah.
And he would compile that, and then he would send, just a few details out to his group of psychics or remote viewers. We would do our information, give it to him. He would work with the police, and the Find Me group are unique in that they also have trained cadaver dogs and search and rescue teams and everything on the team as well. So they could actually take that information and then go out to try to find the locations of the missing people. We were asked quite a lot. In fact, we were asked generally as psychics by the police to not actually tell them anything about the missing person, because that's not really what they need to know. Because they're police officers, they would go and do that afterwards.
Yeah.
They don't want to know about the events of how the person went missing or anything. So you have to be quite constructed as a person working these type of cases, and essentially you don't want any information on the missing person. All you need to provide to the police really is location data of where that person is at that exact moment. And the police, when we were working, wanted GPS coordinates, so I had to try to find a way to give the police a GPS coordinate, which I managed to do through remote viewing. I wasn't accurate all the time, but on one, on the odd occasion was. On one occasion, I was literally only 100 meters away from where they found the missing person. So we can get that accurate. And I think over the years, I can't remember. I did speak to Kelly literally a year ago just to get an update on him, and he did tell me at the time that they have actually helped to recover or find over 30 missing people. So it's probably not a massive percentage, but bear in mind it's a last resort. That's still 30 families that have had closure from what they've done.
Yeah, and even if it's one, I mean, as you say, the closure for the family is so important.
Absolutely, yeah. But I haven't done that for a while because, after doing 250 of them for a while, the majority of the cases were people that were, killed or mutilated and all that kind of stuff. It got to be a bit heavy, so I've taken a few years off from doing that kind of work.
Yeah, and if there is violence around or trauma around, I'm guessing you pick that up as well.
Yeah, but as a remote viewer, in the process that I was taught, and I was taught a technique called controlled remote viewing, which was essentially one of the methods that was taught to the military, for spying on the Russians. It's very different from classical psychic techniques, in that it's very clinical. In that I'm literally just sat here with a stack of white paper and a pen, and I can get the data. I'm getting the data as a reporter or a detective, but I'm not allowing it. And I guess each of us as individuals have these different levels of this. But I myself have taught myself that it's not me. It's not happening to me. I'm detached from it. I'm just an observer getting information. So I personally can stay quite detached from that. But I have seen some remote viewers that can't work it because they do get too emotionally involved in what they're seeing and viewing and stuff.
Yeah. So you said, following on from that point, you said that you're a natural intuitive.
Yeah.
And my feeling, maybe it's just me, but my feeling is that you have to be very open to do that work.
Yeah.
So, and also, particularly if you sit in a medium mystic development circle, what you learn is how to open and close to a greater degree at will.
Yes.
So obviously you have your process for getting in the right mind state and the situation being right for you to be able to do your work. But as a natural intuitive, do you find that you pick up information unwittingly anyway, just from being with people or meeting someone? Or
I used to when I was very young, because I started classical psychic training when I was 15 years old, 15 to the age of 21. But I was luckier than most people in that the household I grew up in, which is this house I'm in now, my mother was a trained clairvoyant psychic, and she ran the local spiritualist church as well. So we had a big library of books, and I saw the interest, and from a very early age, I sang in the choir at the church and everything, and I was there when they were doing all the the mediumship stuff. So I trained in all that stuff from the age of 15 to 21, which helped me within that process.
Yeah. So you said you used to sense things about people, but now you don't so much?
No, the technique I use, controlled remote viewing, essentially puts me in, because all that kind of stuff I used to find when I was doing the classical stuff, the majority of the information was quite spontaneous. So it felt like the intuitive process was the driver, it was in control of the whole process. What we're taught through practicing remote viewing, and then, when you're taught it and then you practice it for a couple of decades more, like I have, is I'm actually totally in control. There is no spontaneity anymore. I'm actually in control of the entire process. So when I sit down with my stack of paper and I write start, and this is the target, that's it. I'm honing in on that target like a laser beam. And for the hour and a half that I'm doing it, that's all I get. It's that information. And the rest of the world's closed out. But the moment I actually write end on the sheet of paper, it's then closed off again. And I found that before doing this and before learning this approach of put me in control, yes, I used to have lots of spontaneous experiences, but I think that I have to be honest, that's the spontaneity of all that's gone deficient for me more as I've gone in the control process. I do get the occasional inkling about a person, a bit of a gut feeling and stuff like that, but it is nowhere near as spontaneous as it was before I started training in remote viewing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm thinking about my work as a therapist, and certainly there'll be things that I want to tune into, but there'll be other things that are inappropriate to tune into. So and I'm aware that it's a very different way of using my intuition in that setting than it might be if I was trying to do a reading for somebody. I couldn't articulate what the difference is, but I know it feels different.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so another thing I want to ask you about, and in a way you've kind of answered it, because I think people misunderstand that you're somehow traveling somewhere, but
Some
actually,
people, some people in my field do believe that that is the case. I've just never seen any evidence of it. For example, there's hundreds of targets, because we have these target polls that many remote viewers work and stuff, and there are targets that I have target polls that I put out for people to work as well to practice with. And for some of these targets, they've got exact set times, so that we say the target is something like the Eiffel Tower, is in Paris, France. We want you to go to it at this exact time, and you can put the time down to the second and the minute. And the thing is, I've seen hundreds, maybe even thousands of people do that very same target, but none of them have ever come back with information to seeing ever any other remote viewer or kind of hovering entity at that target. So that that alone leads me to believe that no one's ever going to the target to get the information. Because if you had 1,000 people, 1,000 really good psychics all going to the target at the exact same second, surely in their remote viewing data that describes everything else, they describe seeing other non-physical entities at the target. And in all the, and I've got huge amounts of research here. I've got millions and millions of trials going back 45 years of remote viewing data, and other than the very odd occurrence where you're looking at an ET or some kind of very strange esoteric target, you don't get the remote viewers recording other remote viewers or non-physicals at the targets.
Yes. So that would support your theory that you're actually tapping into a data stream.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's very different from what some people think it is, which is out of the body experiences. So that's very different.
Very different. Although we do have a current now in the remote viewing called displacement. So if I'm doing my remote viewing thing, I'm getting all this information about the target, and it's building in my head. And what we do with remote viewing, you see, is we have all these set ways of doing things on the paper. We have a structured process where it tries to put imagination to one side, but the process itself is so it was so ingeniously built by Ingo Swann and the military when they did it, in that you describe the target, you never identify it. So if the target, or if you're seeing something and you feel like it's a vehicle or a car, you would try not to say, oh, I see a car. You would try to say, okay, I see something and it feels like it's metallic, it feels like it's moving, it's possibly red, possibly has 4 appendages, they feel like they're round, black, smells like rubber. This feels like a vehicle. So you describe it in the most basic of details, because you might... It may appear as a flashing of inspiration as a vehicle or a car, but if you instantly said a car, that might be slightly wrong, and it might not be a car. It might be a lorry, or it might be a bus, or do you know what I mean? Yeah. So when you get this visual information like this, we put it to one side like that, and we try to break it down into descriptive terms as much as possible to make the data a bit more clear, and to separate what we do is we separate the noise from the signal. That's what we're doing with remote viewing, is we're trying to minimize the noise in psychic data and amplifying the signal of it.
Yes. And again, that sounds very different from the kind of information that I receive, which I think is, I don't know, I'm thinking about it now, maybe more from the creative side of the brain, because a lot of it is symbols and symbolic. And
Yes.
what I've learned to do is to give it exactly as I've been given it
Yes.
and let the other person interpret that symbol. Otherwise, it's my understanding of what's happened, or
Yes.
what it is rather.
Yes.
Yeah.
And some remote viewers do get symbolic data. Not many, because the process we're running, or the process we teach ourselves, is to break things down and to try to describe things with our physical senses. So I would be sat here and I'd do my little squiggle just to get me initial contact with the target, and then I would be sat here with my pen and paper, and I'd be touching the squiggle because that's like my spark of inspiration, and I'd be saying to myself, okay, what does it taste like? And the very first thing comes in my head, I write down, okay, I know it tastes metallic. Okay, if I touched it, what would it feel like? And the very first thing you write down, and then you say things like, okay, if I visualize it here and I'm rubbing my hands over it, what's the size? And you find yourself as a remote viewer going like this with your hands, and getting a sense of scale and direction in shape. So you're actually using your whole body. It's like kinesthetically using your whole body and your central nervous system to to give what I would call hard data rather than interpreted kind of symbolic data.
Yes, yes. It just, the more I'm listening to you, the more I'm seeing how it's very, very different. It's a very different process.
Yes.
Yeah. So we moved away. Coming back to out of the body experiences. So what do you think about that? Have you ever had that kind of experience?
Not within remote viewing, but there, as I said, other people might have. It's just that I'm a very strict. I know what the rules are. I stick to the rules, and it's like I do this, I do that. I don't allow myself to go off course or anything. But as I said, and I got off track a little bit. Something called displacement can happen, whereas and what happens is the remote viewer is getting all this data come in, so getting it's hard, it's solid, it feels like it's a building, feel like I'm in the middle of the street, I can smell the traffic, I can hear the traffic. So you start building up these impressions, and the impressions build so much inside of your own imagination kind of process, your own mind, that your mind starts almost creating. And we do this every day anyway, with normal scenarios of walking down the street and stuff. But your mind starts building this almost like virtual reality of the target in your head, and then for a split second, some of us as remote viewers, I find us or a feeling of ourselves here at the desk doing our remote viewing, but also possibly half at the target, getting that information. But I personally don't think we're actually traveling the target. I think we're actually buying into the illusion of the data so much that it's like a virtual reality where we're half here, half in the virtual reality of the
Yeah.
target.
Yeah, I think actually they're very different experiences. And what you were talking about there, I love the way you language that, kind of creating a virtual reality.
Yeah.
Reminds me of an experience I've had on quite a few occasions now, but it's not something I can do to order. And I don't know what the circumstances are that create it. So the experience is, all of a sudden I'm seeing inside my mind a, a landscape, and it will be as clear as I'm seeing you, which when I'm working clairvoyantly, my imagery is not that clear. So
Yeah.
it's literally like I'm watching a film, but I'm really there. But what fascinates me is that the perspective is always from about a foot off the ground. And
Okay.
I'm zooming along a foot off the ground, and I'm seeing grass or cars or whatever or insects, and I'm journeying. There's always a sense of movement, journeying, sort of zooming along in all of these strange landscapes, and it will play out, and then it will be gone. And I've got no idea of the relevance of that or why I'm seeing that. But it's not, it doesn't have the sense of a dream, it doesn't have the sense of imagination. So I wonder what your take on that is.
Yeah, that could be one of many different experiences. But for example, if you were training me as a remote viewer, um, I would train you to be in control of that. So the moment that started, I would make you as a person take control of the process. And what we do in remote viewing is, because we can land at targets we're not physically landing at targets, but our intent can land at a target and not know where we are. We do this, we could do this thing called door knobbing. So if this microphone were the target, our intent could be like a millimeter away from it. And of course, if you're a millimeter away from it, you can't actually see what the target is. So
Yeah.
as remote viewers, we cue ourselves and we move ourselves about. So like if you were having that process where you're like a couple of inches off the ground, if as part of my process and remote viewing process, if that were happening to you as part of the remote viewing process, I would make you, or I would teach you to then say, okay, I now need to stop here, move myself 50 feet above the target. Now what do I see? So as
Right.
remote viewers, we also do that. We move ourselves inside targets, outside them, to the left, above, and we write all this down on a sheet of paper. So, I would, if I felt that I wasn't getting the right kind of data that I was getting out of a target, I would then write down, okay, now move 100 feet above the target and now describe. And I'd do a couple sheets of data, and then I would say to myself, okay, well, it feels like there's a structure. And then I would write down on a sheet of paper, now move inside the target and then describe. So we're being almost like detectives or investigators. We're moving ourselves around the target from different angles, trying to get an idea of everything about what's there and what we're seeing.
Yeah, and the other thing that really stands out about that is you're asking yourself specific questions. And it
Yes.
was interesting. I was listening to Alex Zakiris from Skeptico, and he had a guy on there, and they were saying, it's an arbitrary number, but 7 questions that you can ask yourself. So rather than just doing a free form meditation or free flow clairvoyant work, it's sitting down with a specific question that you're going to ask yourself. And again, that's a completely different orientation, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, how we start as how we set ourselves up as remote viewers, it's all very structured from the beginning. As it's not spontaneous. So when I sit down, when someone gives me a target and I know I have to work, I'm sat down, and my intent and my focus is I am going to get the exact information that's needed on this target for this client. And I'm gonna, I don't know what it is, but I'm gonna, for somehow my intent's gonna know, and it's gonna guide me, and I'm gonna move around until I feel satisfied that I just cannot squeeze any more information from the target for them. So yeah, you're kind of setting your frame of mind and everything, like, and for me as a person, and it wasn't like this at the beginning. For the first few years, it's a bit problematic for everyone. But for me now, after doing this for 25 years, I can sit here with a coffee. I have music playing on my phone, and it's not meditation. I don't have music with voices in it because I find that if they're singing words, that puts me off a little bit.
Yeah.
But I have like classical music and music from films and stuff. So I'll have music playing. I'll have a cup of coffee or a drink there, but my intent is nothing else exists other than me, the sheets of paper, and the target. But yeah, we are very, very focused on what we're doing with that.
Yes. And is it like most things that ability to really focus? Because that sounds really simple, and actually, it's anybody that's tried to do that's really hard. And
Yes,
do you find that because of your practice that becomes much easier, as you say? Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I mean, when I first started for the first couple of years, my accuracy wasn't brilliant. And for a host, and I tell the people that I talk about this a lot, I went for a whole 6 month period where I plateaued, and I didn't get a single target correct, and accuracy wise for 6 whole months. Most people would have quit by that stage, but
yeah,
no, I just focused on it. But yeah, it's quite, what we do is, within most forms of modern remote viewing, it's not spontaneous, it's not creative, it's not as flowing and as free as classical forms of psychic technique, because its origins really are from military and from intelligence and
yeah,
from science. It's very, I'm just being honest here, it's very hard-nosed, very clinical way of doing things. But for me, as coming from the natural approach, the classical approach to this, I just found that the accuracy for me was so much better that I just had to take this approach rather than what I was classically trained in.
well, and also I'm guessing that there's not so much left open to interpretation, is there?
Absolutely, yeah. Because
Yeah,
you know for the fact you were blind, you didn't know what the target is. It was, it's not spontaneous. So there is a target, and it's been worked out, and someone's written it down. It's been recorded somewhere, that there's an actual target for you to look at. You know that you have your data in front of you in some format. It could be video, it could be audio. Generally, though, it's mainly written in sketches. And then at some point when you give that information over, someone will most probably, in most cases, come back to you and say, here's what the target was. So then you can then take that side by side with your information, mark it, assess it, or get someone else to mark it and assess it, and give you a percentage accuracy on what you're doing. And by doing that, month after month, year after year, it gives you confidence not only in every aspect of your ability, because by doing that month after month, year after year, I know which bits I'm good at. Am I good at looking at people? Are my sketches good? Are my colors good? Or because most people date in remote viewing, they database this information, you see, so they can pull out their information. Or if you're picking a team of remote viewers, you can look at all the people that you work for. You can say, okay, I got these 10 remote viewers here. They're very good at getting people that have been gone missing and stuff. So you would give them a certain type of target.
Yeah.
So it's very good at doing all that kind of stuff. But it's very, I have to be honest, it's very clinical, and it has lost some of the not creativity, because I class myself as a very creative person, but it does lose some of the, I don't know what it is, airiness. I don't know what, but there is something that's missing from classical psychic techniques that's not generally in most remote viewing techniques.
Yeah, but I suppose for you personally, you're expressing your creativity in other directions as well, aren't you? So
That's
that
why I
part
do
of you's getting
photography.
fed. Yeah, yeah.
But I have noticed as well, because I've been a graphic designer all my life as well, that the more I taught myself to understand these subtle connections, and it's the same with classical psychic techniques as well. It's about learning how you communicate with yourself over a period of time. But I found that the more intuitive I get with remote viewing, and how better I hone that and this internal knowing, the easier it is for me to also come up with the exact logo or design for my clients, as in that creative field, because it's almost like I'm tapping into their wants and needs and being able to access it from wherever we get this creative information. And I've also said to people as well, as a creative designer and photographer, the inspiration I get for a design or for a photograph feels exactly the same as the information I get when I'm doing a remote viewing session. So
Yeah.
I think creativity of every single form comes from the same library of information as where you get your intuitive data.
That's great, because I heard it said, I can't remember what podcast it was on, but it's something I've heard before, which is that imagination doesn't come from the person. Imagination finds the person to express itself from.
Yes.
And the more and more I understand about that, the more that feels really true for me. Yeah.
I think we're senders and receivers just tapping into this unseen flow of data that's just flowing everywhere around us. It's like a sea of data, and sometimes we're just picking it, and little bits just come in and grab at us. And as a remote viewer and as a psychic and stuff, we're teaching ourselves to also go out and more interact with that flow of data.
Yes.
Swim in it a bit more.
Yeah. What's your view on channeling?
Well, channeling's very good, and I did do 10 years of channeling in my classical psychic work, and in fact I wrote a book on my channeled kind of like exploits. I don't talk about it in most remote viewing circles because it's not one of my remote viewing books. But yeah, I did 10 years worth of channeling, kind of in a psychic development group interface, where we talked to and interacted with all different kinds of non-human beings. The only problem I have with it, because now I've spent 2.5 decades within remote viewing, which is very science. You do your stuff, you mark it, you get an accuracy. There's no messing around. With channeled stuff, there's not an awful lot of areas where you can feed back on the accuracy of the information.
Yeah.
So that's that, and I know from interactions with some of these life forms as well, that there's a majority of that, because it's like everyday life. There's all good and bad people around.
Yeah.
You walk down the street, half the people are going to be nice, half the people are going to be horrible. I think it's like that within the other realms as well, and a lot of them I did find at the time used to quite enjoy playing tricks with us. They have a trickster element.
The trickster, yeah, without a doubt, I believe that.
Yeah.
I have to say, I haven't found. I mean, not that I've looked at a lot, and maybe I'm going to look at yours now, but I haven't looked at a lot of channeled work that I trust, really. I don't like the flavour of it somehow.
It's hard to know because, as I said, I can't feed back. I can say to people that this is what I experienced. It felt real to me. That's why I wrote it in a book. I did have some good and bad experiences, and they're all in the book. But I can't, unlike my remote viewing, where I can say, well, here's the data, here's the feedback, and this is what people marked it for accuracy. What do you think? And I've done that now for 25 years, and here's my track record over 25 years. You can get a general picture on that. I can't do that with anything channeled because there's no feedback. There's no
Yeah.
way to gauge any of the information that I came up with.
Did you ever have any experiences that were disturbing for you?
Yeah, and they're in the book as well. To be honest, I can't remember what I wrote, but I had quite a few conflicts with like these shadowy type beings that didn't like the fact that humans were trying to expand their consciousness, and they did all they could to trick us and to hinder our attempts at doing that.
Wow, that's really interesting. Yeah. So when you say non-human, um do you mean spirits? Do you mean demons? Do you mean ETs? Are they just
Uh,
different names for
I
the same thing?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
all of the above.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I met in talked to and interacted with, yeah, all of those, and I think they're all around us in all different levels. It's just that we're as human beings, physical human beings, we're very limited in what our eyes and ears and body can see and pick up. We can't pick up any of the X-ray or gamma ray fields or anything like that. So for all we know, there's life all around us. It's just that we can't physically see it. And I think as intuitives on any level, I think with our subtle abilities, we are picking up on some of the things that we just can't physically see it. But just because we can't physically see it doesn't make it any less real.
Yeah. Yeah. So what of alien life or ET? I mean, I'm guessing that you've been asked to do work with
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. So
yeah. I've
so can
done.
you
Yeah,
tell me a bit about that?
yeah. There's and yeah, for yourself or anyone interested, I have actually posted on my YouTube channel loads of live video recordings of me doing remote viewing on these type of projects. So I don't know what the project is, and I'm doing it live in front of a video camera and publishing it.
Wow.
Yeah, so I got things like I've done, Area 51. I've done some of the famous UFO cases like the Roswell crash, and all those I detail, the kind of life forms that I found at those type of events. So I can't prove they're real, um, but the RV data tells me that they're real and they've been interacting with us. And now with the releases of the government stuff that's been coming out the last couple of years, I think we're getting very close to a full disclosure of them knowing they're real and having technology and having bodies and all that kind of stuff as well.
Yeah. Yes, yes. And so in your remote viewing, you said you've done Area 51, so you've
Yeah.
gone back to to the 1940s and as it
No, I
were,
didn't go back in time on that one because Area 51 is still
still
live now.
up and running. Yeah,
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 so
yeah.
it was someone's just set it as a blind target to me. All I had was the number, and once I spent a few hours on it, and I knew I was in some kind of facility that went underground. So I just explored it, and while I was exploring it, I found all these different levels underground, and at each level they were doing different types of research. And by looking at what I was looking at, which were physical shaped bodies, I knew that they weren't human shaped. They had a humanoid form in some cases, but they weren't actually humans. And on the different levels of the structure underground, I knew that they were looking at technology. Then on the next level down, they were looking at weapons or how to weaponize technology. Then another one down, they were looking at how to weaponize not the DNA, just weaponize biology.
Mm.
Yeah, so they were bioweapons out of the life forms that they actually have, the physical life forms they have. So I was picking up on all this kind of very technical stuff. Yeah.
As a point of philosophy, I find it really, really sad that we have to weaponize information.
But being
Just
into UFOs, that's essentially why they've kept it secret, and they've squabbled. All the different countries have squabbled for all this technology for the past 50 years because they want to get a leg over America wants to get a leg over Russia and China wants to get a leg over everyone else. So it's like, yeah, they're just very narrow-sighted with, and they're still narrow-sighted now because there's so much evidence in proof that's come out now that we have craft, and they've been working on technology for 40 years, and they've even admitted that they haven't really got very far because they're trying to keep it so secret that they can't get the right people to work on the project. And it's and I guess that's why they're still keeping it secret, really, because at some level, if it ever comes out, some of us out here will be saying, this is actually criminal, keeping all this from the human race.
Yes.
How this would change the human race if we knew all this information, we knew we weren't the only life in the universe, and that there were beings millions of years more advanced than this that want to interact with us.
Yeah, I mean, it's disgusting, really. It's disgusting that it's not put towards health, healing, free energy,
Absolutely.
all of that stuff.
Yeah.
It's just so sad to
It
me.
is, because if they have craft that can do what we think they can do, and with craft that can go up in space, travel down on near Earth, they can go underneath the sea and all this kind of stuff, and they can travel hundreds of thousands of miles in a blink of an eye. If they have technology to do that, can you imagine what their medical technology would be, and their
Yes.
lives and the pain that would be saved from people?
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, I think we are disgusting, us humans, really, the things that
Yeah,
we do. And if they have all that power, they certainly wouldn't want us to be able to control that and be whizzing
yes.
around
I
the
think
universe.
I think that's why they probably have and the remote viewing data supports, if they have a hands-off kind of feel with us at the moment. They almost treat us, well, they do treat us as like farm animals, the same way as we treat cows and stuff.
Yeah.
Because and I can understand that to a degree because we're always warring. A lot of us are selfish, and it's all about money and personal gain rather than helping each individual. So I understand their faults towards us as well. But I do know that they're also very interested in or a lot of us do have this spiritual side that we are exploring, and I think that very much intrigues them.
Yeah.
And I think it's probably we have it, to be honest, because I think that they have manipulated us over many eons to have that side
Yes.
to us.
Yeah, that's interesting because I was having a conversation the other day, and I do not buy the whole kind of evolution from monkeys, from apes kind of thing.
Yeah.
I don't. I think that we were manipulated or seeded even.
That's what they claim, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I've done that as well in many of the remote viewing sessions when I've looked at this. You kind of, and this is the great thing about remote viewing is once you're looking at something like that, and you kind of say to yourself, okay, this doesn't feel like it's a human, So you can then say to yourself, okay, well, let's go inside their thoughts or their intent, and you can even say, okay, let's follow this life form back or their intent. Why are they doing what they're doing? Let's follow that back to the origination of that intent, and then you just write this stream of information that you're getting, so you can actually work out what their plans are, where they come from, and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. And has anyone asked you to explore who's really running the globe?
Through my crypto reading group, that's some subjects we do tackle on occasion. Yes.
Yeah.
And we do put out videos on that. We quite often get some very interesting data, and some we can't put everything out because we have subscribers, and the subscribers get to see most of what we get is psychic data. But we do some projects that and from time to time we don't put that information out because we're worried about the people that are running the planet. Basically, there is a wealthy, very influential, elite set of people that do make all the rules and run what we as normal people do in our day-to-day lives.
Yeah, and you obviously don't want to say too much about that.
Yeah, I'm trying to pick my words very well.
Yes.
For example, like last month, because it's part of my crypto viewing thing. Every month we look, and literally I did it before. I did my one this month before I came on and spoke to you. So a few days before the end of the month, we, as a group of psychics, we look a month ahead and say, okay, what's the top news stories going to be next month? And then the moment we do it, the very first day of the month, we put all that out to our subscribers so they get a kind of a preemptive information, and then they can make what they want of it and act upon it. last month, for example, I was doing my normal looking at the month stuff, and then for some reason I just had this really hardcore, strange kind of covert military plan information that started coming in, and I wrote it all down, and it looked that it could be a bit like doom mongering. You
Yeah.
know, if I so I made the decision to sanitize that, and I didn't allow that to go out with my normal information because I don't want to worry someone and push anyone over the edge. You know, I think we have to have a bit of ethical control in what we're doing with this as well. So we do sanitize some of our stuff if it looks like it's a bit extreme, or if it looks like it might cause people to panic and do stuff like that. We tend not to put that kind of stuff out as much.
Okay, you don't have to answer this question, but whoever they are, the elite that are really in control, do you think that they are do you think that they are in touch with an alien force as well, and that there's some kind of pact or agreement there?
I haven't been tasked to look at that remote viewing wise. That would be a good target one day for someone to set me. So I haven't
I've
picked up.
just set it for you.
The problem is I can't do anything. It's like something that's like one of the targets that I personally like to work myself. But as a remote viewer, I can't set my own targets because you got to be totally blind.
Yeah.
So for some of these targets, like, you know, being a UFO person, I was dying to do Roswell in Area 51, and I had to wait 20 years for someone to set me those as targets.
Yeah.
So I haven't been set that as a target, but from my normal research, I've seen that there may be some governments of the world that are in a very basic, loose connection with some of these. And I don't like to call them aliens because there's no proof they're aliens. I just call them non-human because they're not really human, and they're not even non-physical at some point. But there are some governments that are in touch with some of these entities, I'd like to call them. Yes, but I don't know to whether that's a good or bad degree. Again, it would, I'd know a bit more if someone ever set me that as a target to look at, but I haven't been set that yet.
Yeah. And again, I'm not in the business of doom mongering, as you say. I think we've got enough of that in the world without contributing to that. However, a theme that seems to come up when I listen to stuff around remote viewing is this idea of some sort of cataclysm or a lot of the states being underwater. So have you come across that in your field?
We do occasionally, again, come up with data that indicates future events that we think might happen. But nothing that's on a set theme like that. For example, it's probably about 10 months before the big COVID thing happened, we started getting some very strange invading data in on our RV. So like we were looking at targets and we were seeing big normal events like the Macy's Day Parade in New York. That was a target, and we were seeing that there was no one there. No one was at the parade. And we were like, well, this just doesn't make sense. How can that be possible? So we didn't do anything with the information. We kept it back. And then it was only after, when halfway through COVID, when the parade didn't happen, stuff, we were like, now we understand it. So we do get data like that. And, we have kept some, I'm trying to pick my words right here, some catastrophic type data back from events that we feel may happen. But we also know that we're looking ahead in the future, and my accuracy when looking, and the other's accuracy when looking ahead in the future isn't as good. That's why we're very cautious about how much of it we put out and how much stay we put on it. But we have picked up some events, but not of a in the most recent stuff we picked up, it's not of a underwater type thing. It was more of a conflict, war type situation data. And because we can't prove any of it, and we're in a bit of a territory at the moment where that kind of thing is quite possible with Ukraine and everything else, we felt it best not at this stage not to publicly put that data out. But I have to be honest with you, we have picked up some data over the years that does indicate big events.
Coming back down to perhaps more practical applications, you mentioned, I didn't pick up on it, but you mentioned the medical aspects and helping doctors and things like that. So does it have to be specifically about something that's existing? So let's say someone has a medical condition and they want to know what the best things are that will help them. Let's say remedies or therapies or whatever it might be. Would you be able to get that data, or is that too non-specific?
No, I haven't actually done that myself, but thinking about it, there's no reason why a competent remote viewer couldn't get that kind of data.
Yeah.
And, as I said, we can go anywhere in time and space. It would be just as easy to target and we usually work in groups of remote viewers because the data kind of complements each other. But if someone wanted to fund it, it would be very easy, for example, to go to a group of remote viewers and say, okay, I want you to look 10 years ahead and tell me how to, what the cure 10 years ahead is for X disease, or what device would be made in 20 years time to help do this process. Yeah, those kind of projects. I know some of those projects are being done by people in different fields, looking ahead at, what's the next Apple technology going to be, that kind of thing. Yeah, so that could be applied to medical stuff and disease stuff. That's the great thing about remote viewing. It's limitless in its capabilities, really.
Yeah, and you touched on, when we were talking about non-human beings,
Yes.
you touched on their interest in spirituality. Do you feel, is it your sense overall that, as some people say, that there is an awakening happening, that more people are becoming spiritually aware?
It's not something I've looked into, and after my 40 years of research of looking at UFOs and all psychic skills and stuff, I've heard people talk about the age of Aquarius and stuff for many years. Yeah. I haven't seen that myself, but some of my researchers within reviewing do, especially the ones that have been doing training for many years. They indicate that each generation of people they teach is getting it faster and better than the previous one. A bit like the 100th monkey syndrome.
Yeah.
I don't know what I feel on that myself. I haven't seen any great ascension. But there again, I have a different belief system. I believe that the universe is in a state of balance, or trying to achieve a state of balance. So I don't think that we could, temporarily, the state of the universe and in the macro and micro elements, it might mirror this. I see it, if you see it like a big yin yang symbol, with the good and the bad. I see it sometimes tipping slightly one way or another. I would say at the moment there's probably more negative, darker stuff than maybe a couple of years ago. So I do see the state of balance is always on a level where it's going one way or another. But I couldn't imagine that. I don't think it would ever be possible for us to exist in the universe where it would ever just be one or the other.
No. And I agree. But I think we could all do with raising our awareness.
We could, yeah. But do you see it? I don't see it.
I suppose I want to see that.
I would love to see it.
Yeah.
But, you're in the UK like myself, aren't you?
Yeah.
I mean, look at what's happened the last week alone with the government. That's not people that's got the viewpoints of the poor people in the country to heart.
No.
So I just don't see it. And just being just looking back over the decades of the years, we have the same amount of wars now as we did 100 years ago, as we did 1,000 years ago.
Yeah, and I just think we're dumbed down by design, actually.
Yes.
And
I think a lot of that is down to control.
Yeah.
Because there are people and entities. I don't think it's just like humans working on their own. It's like the universe, as I said, it's got good people, good life forms, bad life forms, and it's in this state of bad. So I do think that humans are being influenced by bad humans and by bad or negative life forms, just as well as every now and again you get good influences for angelic or healers, helpers, life forms as well. So there's this struggle that's always going on. Yeah, It's very complex. It's very hard to try to put it into a simplistic term because it's not simple. It's very complex.
Yeah. And I sometimes I also think that in a sense we create our own realities as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I mean I try to avoid anything mainstream.
That's the
But
intent thing.
yeah.
We create the universe, and it works within remote viewing and stuff as well. If you're psychic or remote viewing, you say to yourself, I can't do this because you have an aversion to it. Then when you try to do it within remote viewing, you won't be able to do it. It just won't work for you.
Yeah. And I saw a fascinating study which was looking at peer-reviewed papers that people have done for their PhDs, and it's I can't remember what the figure was now, but so many of them absolutely cannot be replicated across fields. So not just psychology, across fields, and it comes down, I think, doesn't it, to that kind of observer effect.
Yes.
That, like you say, the intention.
Yeah.
And if you're taking a position, because it's very hard to be truly neutral about something, isn't it?
Yeah. And we find that within remote viewing and all the research of psychic stuff that I looked at as well, and we call it the observer effect because the person running the experiment, and I think they call it the goats in the sheep kind of.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
The people involved, and this happens with remote viewing, the people involved in the experiment affect the results of the experiment. And because, if you yourself, like myself, I'm putting lots of public information out of everything I do, I tell people that I also believe that what I record today as data that we put out, I also believe is and I don't know how this works, it's probably affected because it goes out public, by what people are saying, thinking and reading about it or seeing on YouTube 10, 20, 30 years into the future. They're actually affecting what I'm getting now into the past.
Yes, because in quantum physics, time
doesn't,
isn't linear, is it?
Yeah. In quantum physics, time doesn't exist, and we know this from remote viewing. Time doesn't exist to us as remote viewers.
Yeah. I mean that just blows your mind, doesn't it? When you try to think about
and
that.
I've done a series of experiments where I did the remote viewing in 1 month, knowing that it was going to be for for an event that would happen a month later, but that wouldn't even be chosen by someone as a target till a month after that.
Oh, God.
At the time I did the remote viewing, the target wasn't even going to exist. Well, the event wouldn't exist for a month, but it wouldn't be chosen as a target until 2 months after I'd done the remote viewing. And I still got really amazing accuracy on the targets.
And that is mind-blowing.
It is.
Really.
The more you think about this, the more your head goes, how can this be possible? But it just goes to show you that there are no limitations to the human existence. I don't like to call it mind or spirituality body because I don't know what is involved here. But there are no limitations to what we can achieve as humans. And I think that's also what interests these other life forms. I don't like to call them aliens, but non-humans. That's why they're interested in what we do, because they actually realize that we have this capability that we don't realize that we have, and a lot we probably know it to some small extent because we're interested in this kind of stuff. But the normal man on the street doesn't know anything about their capability. I'm only just grasping that we can do, we as humans could do anything if we put our minds towards it. But yeah, the normal person doesn't get it. But I know that most of the non-human entities, they know, and that's why they're interested in us as a race.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much research that looks at this and maybe calls it different things.
Yes.
And looks at it from different perspectives. I mean, what comes into mind is Rupert Sheldrake's morphic fields, for instance.
Yes, yes.
And I once had a kind of, what would you call him, a spiritual mentor, and he said, you can develop any system or belief, and if enough people buy into that, it then has a validity because people are imbuing that with something.
It makes it real, and that's what this is where it gets hard with us with remote viewing as well, because if you didn't have the feedback element to assess the accuracy of the information, it makes it invalid, you see, because as a remote viewer, we can just as easy pick up on social kind of thoughts about something, a conspiracy theory that might not be real about something, as we can about the real event itself.
Yeah.
And the conspiracy theory data, let's say like the flat Earth theory, 'cause we
Yeah.
all know that the planet's round. It's obvious, but we can, as remote viewers, also pick up and report just as validly all these thoughts about it being flat and stuff, and not know the difference between two, because there's a social entity. There's enough people that believe in it that it's there in its own kind. It has its own energy now. It exists.
Yeah. I mean, that has so many possibilities, doesn't it? If people could really be aware of that and harness that,
Yes.
From just mind over matter, trying to heal yourself. I mean, in any field, there's so much research to back up that kind of perspective, isn't there? Yeah. Okay, so is there anything else that you would like to share or comes into mind today?
No, other than even though it sounds crazy and amazing, anyone can do any of these skills. We all have an ability. It's not, we might not all be the top world psychics of the world and stuff, but we all have some kind of intuitive ability that any of us can hone with just simple work. You can work on yourself, and within remote viewing, we have this phrase called practice.
Yeah.
Because that's what it comes down to in the end. Years of practice over and over until you build this internal muscle memory.
Yeah.
But for the normal person, just the biggest thing I can say to everyone I know is just look into it, read. There's so much stuff out there now, and just take meditation. Meditation is the key to everything. Learn about because me being as good as I am at remote viewing is not anything other than me learning about myself and how I interpret these very subtle feelings and signals. So I'm just learning about myself over the past 2 decades more than anything else, and anyone could do this.
Yeah, and I think if you're a truth seeker or a spiritual seeker or whatever you want to call it, I think eventually you learn that it's not outward, it's inward.
It's all inward, yeah.
Yeah.
And the start for that, which any of us could do, is meditation. And if anyone wants to learn that, there's huge amounts of videos and resources on YouTube alone that you could just do. A few minutes meditation a day will start you on an amazing journey.
Yeah, it's creating that stillness, isn't it? And that ability to focus for more than 10 seconds on something.
Yeah, put the phone down, get off TikTok, leave Facebook alone, and just even if it's just 10 minutes a day, just to yourself, you'll start to see your intuition. You're starting to feel things, just starting to understand yourself a bit more, and it opens up new doorways to where you fit within the universe, really.
Yeah. So, okay, Daz, so where can people find you and your stuff?
Yeah, I have a YouTube channel called Remote Viewed, so you could just do a search for that, and there's probably about 200 free videos on that of all different types of remote viewing, including lots of my live remote viewing, so you actually see me do it live on camera. And I also have a website called remoteviewed.com as well, and there's huge amounts of resources on there. There's templates so people can learn how to do this. And I also have a free remote viewer magazine. It's been going 12 years. And that's called 8 Martinis on 8martinis.com. So people can download that and have a look at all the examples in that as well.
Oh, thank you so much. You're such a generous soul. Thank you. I've really, really enjoyed talking to you today.
It's been fun. Me too. Yeah, it's been great fun.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Daz.
Have a good weekend. Take care.
See you. Bye.
Hi everyone. If you like asking questions like me, please like and subscribe. Thank you.